Dear Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's great to be on. At last.
At long last. Will you please tell me why you decided to run a marathon with your mouth taped closed?
Because nobody understood the power of breathing at the time. There was no research on it. There was no experts on it. There was no data on it. There was no nothing on it. So I actually didn't intend breathing like that originally. Rather, I wanted to get the information. And that's why I tested with Sean at Health Matters. I did that in advance and found out some really cool stuff during that test. And I was like, okay, I need to be nasal breathing throughout this. Because remember, I also hadn't ran in 7 years. No endurance training for 7 years. I did no endurance training program. Zero.
Okay, Sean probably mentioned this to me, but I don't know why I didn't remember that. No training.
Zero. Judo is my sport that I play now. So I was doing my judo. I did some gym work to make sure my joints were okay. That's it.
And you ran
I'm breathing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to have to walk through a few steps here now because that doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so let's maybe take it back a little bit. Why breathwork, breathing, nasal breathing? Why has this come to your world? Why is this something that we're talking about now with you in a position with so much experience in this now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm 41, 42 this year. All my young life was spent with asthma. So from at least the age of 3 till about 19. And I would be good some weeks and really bad other weeks. And I love GAA, love sport. When I was fit, I was at the top of the realm. But when I was sick, I couldn't walk 100 meters with an asthma attack. And the only solution at the time was steroids and antibiotics and more inhalers. And it got to the point where I was about 19 years of age. And in total that year, I spent 6 months in bed sick with asthma. I had 3 inhalers a day. I had over 14 course antibiotics in just over a year and 425 prednisolone 5 milligram tablets.
Wow.
And I know that because I get my tax receipts and I found them a year later.
Jeepers.
But yeah, that was the extent where that's how bad it got for me. And funny enough, because I know we were talking about whole life and stuff like that as well. It was at a time when I was studying something that I absolutely hated. It was computer science. So I was spending 12 hours a day indoors watching, TV screens and trying to figure that out. And it really wasn't me. And it was a horrible experience. And my doctor says, if we put you away in a room and wrap you in bubble wrap till you're 25, we don't know if you're going to get better. That was my GP's response.
But we'll keep pumping you with this stuff just in case.
Not just in case, just this is our only solution.
Okay.
I mean, you only know what you know. So that was their solution to asthma. Asthma is an inflammatory problem. It's a problem with your airways, and this is our medication, and this is our solution. And that kept me alive. I can't understate that. I had doctors come to me in the middle of the night, keep me alive as I was a kid. Been in hospital several times with asthma as well. So I wouldn't have been here without the doctors. But what they don't know is lifestyle. They don't have a clue about that because they're not taught it. Like I wrote a book last year and I was looking at the learning outcomes, which anybody can find for medical degrees in Ireland. So out of, I think it was 56 modules, there was 1 module for lifestyle, 12 lectures, an elective, 4 of which were dedicated to the production of dairy.
Well,
that's it.
Yeah.
Everything else is anatomy, physiology, biology, pathology, and figuring out how to deal with it from what they deal with it in the hospital setting.
Not to derail the conversation here.
But you're tempted to.
Let me derail the conversation here, is what I should say. Because it's a conversation I have so many times. I worked in the medical industry and I keep reiterating this point. Huge respect and admiration for everybody in the industry. My partner's an OT. I worked as a physio for years, doctors, nurses, everybody involved in that process. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to heal, we're trying to help, we're trying to support, etc., etc. Do you think, because I agree with you, like a lot of my friends will be doctors, that's not part of the training, and anybody who happens nowadays to be proficient, if you find a good doctor who understands lifestyle, they've done it themselves outside of their formal training. Do you think that should be part of their training, or do you think that we should accept that we need another element of healthcare in our, because like we sometimes describe the medical system as sick care. When you're sick, if I break my leg, I'm going to the doctor. If I get very sick, I'm going to the doctor. You had asthma and there was no other solution. You went to the doctor and it kept you alive. Do you think that we should improve the sick care model to include health and lifestyle? Or do you believe that we can do that outside the realm of the formal medical system and start to collaborate a little bit more?
I think there's options, and you got to flow with the culture of a country as well and what way that works. For me, I think collaboration works best. Like, you don't need to be a doctor to be able to help somebody to exercise, to be able to help somebody to shop better, eat better. You don't need to be a doctor to do that. So the integration of these things, I think, is a more viable model than just keeping it for the medical care system. And even with, but I think an awareness of it and an education into that would be highly valuable, because it provides, like, let's boil it down. Mild to moderate depression, exercise outperforms every drug every single time in every single trial. But how often, and I have friends who've gone through depression, it's never mentioned.
It's very hard to put it in a pill and sell it, you see, Leo. That's
well, it absolutely is. And this isn't anybody's fault. It's just, it is the way it is. But you're asking me, should the medical care system, should it be just in their realm or should it be integrated? I'm like, I would love to see that happen. I'd love to see better awareness and better integration happen amongst them. But we're humans and there's politics and there's money involved and everything else.
And if you think about it, like, doctors at the moment are busy enough. And to be fair to a lot of doctors I know, they do understand that there's more to this.
Oh, yeah.
And they also understand their own limitations, but there's nobody else. So this is, like you with the asthma, this is the only toolbox they have. Do we want to give them more tools and make them busier? No, in my opinion, no. We want them to do what they're really, really good at, which is to effectively recognize, diagnose, and treat specific conditions, diseases, the broken legs, all the orthopedics, all that kind of stuff, and give them less work to do having to worry about metabolic health, which is the area I spent a lot of time in. Like, we don't want to have our doctors completely overworked dealing with people with obesity and liver disease and cardiorespiratory diseases because they haven't taken care of their lifestyles. They're completely overworked, completely undersupported. Do we want to give them more responsibility? Yeah. No. I believe that people like yourself and people in our circles can bear that burden. But I do agree with you. For the doctors to have an understanding and to be willing to collaborate, I think would be amazing.
And there's an onus on the individuals as well. Like, they're going in and going, give me antibiotics.
Yeah.
Like, give me my steroids, give me my medication. And they're like, so the doctor's like, okay, well, I can give them this and release some pain and let them get on with their life. Or, you know, I can try convince them. And by the way, we got like 10 minutes to do this. So
very hard.
The individuals and anybody who's listening to this, we have our responsibility too. We have our choices to make.
Don't like that though. that means I have to do some work now. I want the comfort. I want to take care of me, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I interrupted there and nearly derailed the conversation, but you were telling me about your journey to breathwork.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, that was a situation I was in. The one good thing was that the GP got me a consultation with one of the top respiratory consultants in Ireland at the time. He was in Beaumont, but it would take about a year to get that appointment. Nice. So my mom was listening to the radio one day, heard Patrick McKeown on the radio. This was back in about 2002. He just started his Buteyko clinic practice. Heard of this method called the Buteyko method and heard it was really good and there was some science on it for asthmatics, and says, hey, Leo, what do you think of doing this workshop? And I says, yeah, let's go for it. And so my dad drove me over. 3 Mondays, 3 mornings, 2 hours each morning. I learned the physiology of breathing. I learned the techniques that I needed to do, and I learned the plan that I needed to implement. And then the rest was up for me. And that's what I did. I trained 2 to 3 times a day, every single day. And by the time I got to Beaumont, I was symptom free. And I went in and I was chatting to the consultant. Richard Costello was his name. And I was chatting to him and he says, well, look, what can I do for you today? And I says, well, I have this journal full of exercises and lifestyle that have changed. And he was like, oh, great. He goes, I actually know the method. I know your teacher. And he says, how can I help you? I says, well, I want your permission to come off my medication. And he says, sure. He says, but be sensible, go slowly, always have an inhaler in hand and you know your body more. So just easy does it. And it was about 6 months later where I was symptom and medication free. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And it's actually brilliant to hear Richard Costello's approach to that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. There's good people everywhere.
Yeah.
Good people everywhere and all. And, I'm sure it was a great relief for him that it wasn't somebody else coming in saying, there's nothing we can do for you.
So did this obviously experience ignited your passion or motivation to maybe help other people with the same thing?
Yeah, well, it got me back into sport, got me back into fitness. I left the computer science, went back and decided to be a personal trainer, and was studying sports management through UCD, and just stayed in college and university. And do you know what? I didn't really know myself. It took me till I was 27 or 8 till I found out what part. Like, I went through everything in the industry, from scrubbing toilets and washing down treadmills to lifeguarding and swim teaching, as everybody of my generation doing
proper
that
education,
did.
it sounds to me, yeah.
Yeah. And I was about 27, and I says, right, I had a family, had a home, had a baby, and I was like, I gotta start making money here and start making something of this. I can't just, be finding my way through. And I started to realize the best people I worked with were people who had health issues and were just putting in the foundations of health. The foundation, like simple stuff like good exercise, good training, good nutrition, good sleep habits, just good foundations to life. And when they did that, you had, rheumatoid arthritis symptoms started clearing up. You have diabetes started to come in line, and blood sugar started to level off. You had cardiovascular disease symptoms started to disappear. You had asthma symptoms, and I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible. And that's when I started to focus in on being the best trainer I could. Okay. And I've done that for like 15 to 20 years overall, yeah.
And your approach now would be a combination of all of the things that make us human, essentially, really.
Yeah. And what happened about 2015 was I had this lady who really overweight. For her, like, she was about 220 pounds in Canadian money at the time. So you're looking about 18 stone, I think. Trained with me for 9 months, put in a lot of training, good nutrition, not perfect, but good sleep, not perfect. At least that's what I thought. And then she lost a grand total of 5 pounds. I was like, what is going on here? And so I gave her options. I said, look, we need either blood tests, we need psychology, or we need some life coach on board. And so she fired me. She was like, you're gone. You're out of here. I don't want this anymore.
That sounds like work.
But I was like, look, you can stay with me and I can pretend that you're going to get results, or I can be honest with you and just be upfront and go, we got more stuff to look at here and dive into you in order to help you achieve your goal. But she came back to me. About 3 months later, she came back to me and says, actually, or one of the other recommendations I said was a sleep test. She says, I got the sleep test. I have sleep apnea. And I was like, okay. And she goes, oh, by the way, in the last month, she lost like 2 or 3 stone. And I was like, wow. So in other words, she was using a machine to help her to sleep better. But as soon as she was sleeping better, her body was able to restore better. And because her body was restoring better, it started to come in line with the lifestyle she was living. And I was like, wow, that is the impact of stress and lifestyle on a person's ability to gain weight or lose weight or be in shape or be healthy. And I was like, I got to go back. And I knew the one tool I had was breathing at the time. And I was like, I got to go back and know the inside out of this. So I went back, got all my qualifications, ready to be armed to bring back to my clients. And then I met these 2 women on the course. And they're like, oh, we did the Wim Hof method. I was like, the what? The Wim Hof method. I said, what's that? So we get in cold water and I was like, wow, what is that? I was like, that is totally different to what I know. And Patrick was there and he was like, don't do that. But I'd been through some stuff before where, in the fitness industry, you get radical people who are dogmatic about their things. But there's a lot of value in that as well. And I was like, I got to explore what this is. And that just set me off on a path of going, what's going on with breathing for health and performance? What is the ins and outs of it? Okay. And I kind of spent about 5 years really delving into that and figuring that out. And that's how I came across a marathon idea.
I don't know if that's a direct link there, those 2 dots I joined. Yeah, I do some breath work. I should run a marathon with no training.
Well, I suppose I always, if you're in the industry, you're like, run a marathon is kind of like a tick the box kind of thing to do.
A passage almost, yeah.
Rite of passage. And I was like that was an interesting idea. And then obviously I knew about VO2 max testing at the time. And I was like, okay, that gives me an idea of what's going on with my body. And then I was like, and I can put into practice what's going on with breathing. I can really see. And that's why when I did the testing with Sean, I had the data on myself because I ran the test a little bit differently to the way he runs it. So I breathed a certain way at the start of the test, and then I changed my breathing patterns throughout it and gave him indicators. And what we found was nasal breathing was directly linked to your aerobic energy system. And when you mouth breathe, when I mouth breathe, that it then started to use lactate and anaerobic pathways a lot faster, like within seconds.
Wow.
And I was like, that's what blew me, because then I went, well, if I have this knowledge, and if I stay nasal breathing for the marathon, then that means I stay aerobic, then I have a better chance of completing this marathon. Because if I go anaerobic, and lactate, and pain, and hurt, and I do that too early, I know I don't have the condition in my legs to get around the course. It won't be possible.
So you hack the system.
So I hacked the system.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't recommend others to do it. Like, it's a stupid idea. But for me, it was a really great idea because there was no information in the world at the time. Genuinely.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're on this topic, let's go a little bit deeper. When I had Patrick on, we did discuss nasal breathing, but I find, for me especially, it takes several bangs of the hammer to get this through my skull. So let's, from your perspective, from your expertise, from your experience, give me the kind of 101 on nasal breathing. Why should we nasal breathe? What are the advantages of nasal breathing? And we'll get into the hows and the practical applications maybe a little bit later. But just from all of the knowledge that you have right now sitting in front of me over the years, personal and otherwise, give me the nasal breathing 101.
Okay. Quite simply, would you eat food through your nose?
I've tried.
Did it work?
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's not made for it. If you have good anatomy, we are made to breathe through our nose, in and out through our nose, all day, all night, all through low level and moderate level exercise. That's what we're made to do as human beings. But I told you, I had asthma as a kid. I was a mouth breather as a kid. I have really poor facial anatomy. I've crooked teeth, even though I had 11 teeth extractions.
11?
11, right?
You've got loads of teeth there now, so
yeah,
put some back in for you.
They're yeah. Some of them were baby teeth, and then some of them were adult teeth, and then they want to take a further 4. They want to take all my wisdom teeth out too. Okay, and I was at that point, I was like, no.
For overcrowding reasons?
Overcrowding, but you got to ask yourself, why are they overcrowding? The tradition in Ireland in orthodontic work is they're overcrowding because your mouth is, you have too many teeth for your mouth. Well, you could flip that on its head, which is what they do in third world countries in South America, and they go, maybe your mouth is too small for your teeth. Now, why would your mouth be small? Why would your jaw be small? And now we start to look at how you were born and how you grew up. Everything from what type of birth you had to how long you were breastfed, if you were breastfed, to did you transfer onto soft food or hard food, to how, there's, without even going into emotional stuff and psychological stuff, which all impact how you breathe. To give you some other examples, are you allergic to any foods that you're eating, or to pets, or to the environment that you're in? All of these things can lead you to mouth breathing. When you mouth breathe, your tongue drops in your mouth when you're at rest, so it doesn't provide any pressure for the jaw to expand as you grow up and as you develop. So you might end up with smaller airways, a smaller jaw structure, and then overcrowding in the teeth. It also means that you end up mouth breathing as a resting breathing pattern. And if you do that, you are putting yourself in a stressful state. You can meditate all you like. If you're mouth breathing, you're still going to be in a stressful state. You can do all the saunas you like, take all the massages you like, listen to all the music you like. But if you're mouth breathing, and particularly even if it was asleep, it's even worse again. You are always in a more stressed state than your natural state. Okay. That's why it's so important. It's your human baseline.
How do we know this? Is this obviously from looking at how we've developed and then looking at people who would maybe tend to nose breathe from a younger age? And to maybe put more substance to my question there, I did explore this with Patrick slightly as well. Mm-hmm. If we are meant to mouth breathe.
If we're meant to.
Sorry, nasal breathe. Excuse me, good catch. Should we, why does that transition happen? Surely there should be, obviously, You've touched on some factors there, stress, environmental factors and stuff like that, but surely we should be able to see massive populations of people who maybe don't have the same environmental stresses that we do, who are nasal breathing. Or is it a result of the change in the world that we live in now? There's a lot more environmental factors that are forcing this transition from nasal breathing as a young, because my baby's nasal breathing at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm watching like.
Well, my 3 don't and didn't. One was born with a cord wrapped around her throat, and from the minute go, she was a mouth breather.
Really?
I'm told that it's not physically possible to be a mouth breather when you're born. I've seen it happen firsthand. So that's her life. That's her life path. Yeah, is restoring that. Yeah. I have a second one who, amazing immune system. She got a virus for the second time, pre-COVID, but they thought it was a chicken pox for the second time, which they also say you can't get. But anyway, that was around age 5 or 6, and her immune system impacted her breathing, and so she's been working for a number of years on restoring her breathing because of that. And the last one, she was born. She actually was a twin in the womb. The twin didn't survive, and she would have a lot of emotional attachments to her mommy, and in particular. And I have a feeling that that's the reason why she developed into mouth breathing, because when she's separated there, that's when her breathing starts to change and to go. And then you have my own genetics as well that are in the mix too.
Yeah, I didn't consider the genetic factor there too. And is it, because we spoke, again, I'm just using my only kind of context here, which is the conversation I had with Patrick. We spoke about a lot of the time the transition is triggered by stress. So for example, if I'm in a high performance situation, the boxer one is the obvious one. When you see a boxer's jaw drop and they start to mouth breathe, you know they're under pressure. You know they're stressed. You know their physiology is stressed. So is it that kind of gasp reflex almost played out in a long chronic way? Like, I'm stressed, so I need more oxygen, I need more air, so it gets a little bit shallower, I need to get it in quicker. Is that why we trigger? Is that why the switch goes from nasal to mouth, even in the example of your children?
Most of it is subconscious. So we're not consciously switching and gasping because of a gasp. For some people it is because of a gasp. For other people it's just low-lying factors over a long time. For example, if you had a gerbil and you had an allergy to the gerbil's hair, and that you're around it, your nose automatically going to get inflamed and stuff, so you're just going to drop into mouth breathing just as a natural way of survival.
Yeah.
Stress isn't bad, it's survival, but you don't want to be surviving for 50, 60, 70 years. You don't want to be surviving when you're meant to be resting at night. And that's where I'm like, okay, this is where it needs to be restored, where it needs to be trained, where it needs to be built up. And the first, you asked me, how else do we know? First records or insights into this was about the 1860s, where there's a book written called Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life. You can get it for free on Google. Kids, it's brilliant.
You know what? You better shut your mouth if you want to save your life.
Nothing to do with breathing. But yeah, like that. So this was a guy, he was an artist that was based in London. And then he went out around the Commonwealth and went out around the tribal people. And he noticed in the beginning that all the tribal people were breathing through their nose, compared to the people in London, where they were mouth breathing, and they were developing all sorts of, as he described it, deformities and diseases. But he noticed that the longer he was going through this and observing these peoples, that the more they took on Western habits and British habits, then their breathing started to change as well.
Okay.
To the point where it was like, where he was writing the book, and the observations he was making was when you introduce a load of white sugar, when you introduce alcohol, when you introduce wrapping people up in the same temperature clothes the whole time, that then the child will start to change to mouth breathing. And when they eventually do that at night, when they're resting, that's when all these diseases and deformities start to appear.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think of there's a couple of questions I remember asking Patrick that afterwards, like, oh shit, I should have gone deeper on that one. The conversation sometimes that I hear when discussions like this occur from people who are pushing back slightly for whatever reason. And when I say pushback, a lot of times people, myself included in people, are uncomfortable with the fact that we're not doing the thing that we think we should be doing, or that these people say on a podcast we should be doing, i.e. nasal breathing now. So one of the questions is like, well, what about singing? Or what about when you're, like, you ran a marathon, which is kind of steady state. What about when you're sprinting or you're out of breath? Or are there certain occasions where, like, why is our mouth connected to our airway? So there's obviously certain occasions where, right, I need air right now. That's okay. But that should be like 1% of the time, really, if even.
Yeah, I mean, mouth breathing in terms of mouth exhaling is so important for many things, for communication and for expressing emotions.
Okay.
Yeah, or laughing.
Yes.
Like, expressing yourself is really important. And if you're the type of person that doesn't express themselves, well, then you are suppressing yourself, which means you're keeping it inside. And we can use that language. We keep it locked inside. We've heard that language. So how are you locking it inside? Well, people actually tend to lock those emotions inside in the physical way by closing their mouth, sometimes by closing their throat, by changing their posture and adapting their posture into that rounded kind of fetal position, protecting position. That also isn't good. So when we say nasal breathing, when I say all day, all night through low and moderate exercise, yes. But obviously, if you need to communicate or to express, which is a really important element of breathing, that's where it goes beyond the Buteyko method, and where breathing goes beyond into other realms, into the Wim Hof method, and even beyond that again into just how you relate to life.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're really, really important factors in breathing.
Okay.
Really important, because somebody can come in, they might be a nasal breather, they might be a slow, low, deep breather, but the breathing is still adapted. It's still changed because maybe they also have a rounded posture and a quiet voice, and they don't like to speak up about themselves because, maybe they were abused when they were younger, or maybe they're completely introverted and it's no longer serving them. And so they also have to learn how to use their voice and use their breath to restore that natural center in the middle. One where you can use the expression, and also one where you can protect yourself when you need to.
This is the interesting part I find about this conversation sometimes as well. It's kind of the chicken or egg thing. Do we have a lot of these symptoms because we're not breathing right? Are we not breathing right because we have a lot of these environmental factors? And I often get to the conclusion it doesn't really matter, because if you can kind of hacked the system, if you can understand that they're linked, you can, one, focus on your environmental factors, but two, you can also focus on the actual technique and the breathing itself. And even by just doing one of those things, you're probably going to have a positive outcome. But by doing both, you're almost going to guarantee a positive outcome. And does it really matter whether it was the breathing or the environment? Because you're getting a positive outcome for you, which I think a lot of the time one can get lost in the nitty gritty of arguing about, does nasal breathing actually do this? And does mouth breathing actually do this? Whereas if you're getting the results, does it really matter that much? I know on a broader level, people like to have that replicatable data, and we'll talk about the science now in a second as well. But whether it's chicken or egg, try it. If it works, it works. And if it works, it works. I was taught that in college as well, about all these different techniques, and there's people arguing about it's the placebo effect, and it's A and it's B and it's C and it's science. Does it work? Yeah, do it. Does it work for you specifically? Yeah, do it. Try it. If it doesn't work, don't do it. If it does, do it. So yeah, we can kind of, it sounds reductionist, but at the end of the day, we want to feel good, want to perform well, and that's pretty much it. So
you got to remember why you're doing it. Yeah, exactly. Which is feeling good. It's feeling healthy. It's having energy. It's been able to share your skills and your passions with the world. Like, that's really why we do this health stuff. It's just that now we have to put it in place. But if the breathing adapts, I find that once a system becomes adapted or changes to suit your lifestyle, you might change all of your lifestyle and improve that, but that breathing might just stay stuck because you haven't shifted it yet. So I find that you're like the best solution is, over time, to address both sides of the equation. So then you're leaving no stone unturned, and you're like, okay, I can be confident that at least I have been responsible for what I am in control of, and I can let go of the other stuff, and this is just life. Like for me, I got brutal facial anatomy. I'll happily say that. Like, my jaw is thin for life. It's not going to change at this stage. I've done as much work that can be done on it, unless I'm going to invest a ton of money in, and I don't have it to invest in. I don't care about it that much. So I'm like, that's okay.
Okay. And is that a disadvantage for you with your breathing now, or is that just a symptom of originally not breathing optimally and now you're breathing optimally? So you've kind of solved the main problem. Even though you can't change the shape of your jaw, will the shape of your jaw have a detrimental effect on your ability to nasal breathe or perform, do you think?
No.
Okay.
No, because I now know how to work the system. I know how to work my breathing in order to extract the most out of me. So, for example, there is some data to show that you can reach a VO2 max, so your maximum oxygen consumption, in other words, your maximum effort on that test, using just nasal breathing. But I know for a fact that I can't, because when I am power breathing through my nose, and you might even hear if I do it like this, You will usually see my left nostril collapse in. There it is. I can even see it now. And you might even hear that over the microphone, is that the left nostril will collapse in. So I know when I'm giving my full maximum effort that just the anatomy of that collapses in. So therefore, yes, I do need to breathe through my mouth at high level intensity exercise. And that is, I find that that's person specific. And there appears to be a relationship between the aerobic energy system and nasal breathing, but how close that relationship is will depend on the person. There's not the research there. For example, when I finished a marathon, by the way, I was so fascinated with this. I was training a GA team at the time for like 2 years, and I got a handful of them who were nasally adapted and trained, and I brought them in and paid for their VO2 max tests. And I got them to do it and found the same relationship there.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so exact same relationship.
It's kind of repeatable then.
So at least I know that within that cohort of people that I've trained, that I know that they're at the level where I want them to, that there is that relationship there between aerobic energy and nasal breathing.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
As a little reminder and a recap for me and for anyone who may not have listened to the Patrick episode, you've nicely explained there the kind of detriments of mouth breathing. The specific advantages or physiological occurrences when you nasal breathe. I know we'd have things like nitric oxide release in the bloodstream and stuff like that, but just as a little recap for me.
Are they advantages, or are you just
okay? Let me rephrase that then.
Because and that's an important question.
Yeah,
I know I'm been a dick about it, but
you push back all you want.
The reason why I asked that question is because now you're getting research of, and the research really is on people who have been mouth breathing and are now nasal breathing, and they feel some feel these benefits, some don't feel these benefits. And my question is as well, are they actually benefits? No, human beings should walk around feeling good. That shouldn't be revolutionary. You should have energy to do your day, to play with your kids, to play your sport, and to do all your work. And to go bed at night, fatigued and tired because you've worked that day. But you shouldn't be chronically tired and dropping in the middle of the day and hardly able to drag yourself out of bed in the morning and falling into bed and needing coffee at 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. That's not healthy, in my opinion. So those benefits are they really benefits? I can sell you on it and say, here, buy my fancy program for $3,000. Or we can just say, no, this is just how good you should be feeling. This should be baseline good.
Okay, so let me park my question about advantages and benefits for a second then, because we'll get there, because I'm interested in your philosophy on this, because it sounds very similar to mine. Do people know how good they feel? In your experience, do people have an idea of where they are on that spectrum of I feel good, I don't feel good? Is part one of the question. Part two of the question, I'll just keep going here until you get so confused. You have to pick the question. And part two of the question is, when they realize it, do people in general have the tools or the experience or the knowledge to recognize what they need to do to change it? And number three, do you believe it comes from environment? Do you believe it's different now than it used to be maybe? And do you think that's a problem? So it's all kind of the same question. But I know you know how to answer it because we've discussed it briefly before. But
well, let's start with that. Why don't you imagine like I haven't done any health stuff and I'm just your normal Irish person. Okay, and you ask me the question, how are you feeling? Not bad.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Let's take those words. I feel not bad. Well, let's use the language. It's a double negative in English, which means it's a positive. So I feel good, but I didn't tell you I feel good. Why didn't I tell you I feel good? Because I don't feel good. But I don't feel so bad that I feel bad. I don't know how I feel. That's really what I'm saying.
Okay.
Or I feel, I might feel good, but I don't want to tell you that I feel good. So our sense of interoception, which is, I think, the sixth or seventh sense after your usual five, is the sense of what is going on inside your body. So proprioception is your relationship to time and space. Interoception is what's going on inside your body. And your breath is the main anchor into feeling what's going on inside. It's very hard to feel what's going on inside unless you tune in. So in our language of every day, we have embedded in our culture even the idea that we don't know how we feel. Or another way people say it is, how do you feel? And I say, yeah, I think I feel good. I think I feel good. So you don't feel good. You're trying to layer over how you really feel with a thought process in order to convince yourself you're faking it till you make it.
Yeah.
So that's where I get really interested in is, do people actually know what good is? You know it when you experience it. But if you don't think you feel good, well, then I'm quite sure that you haven't really known what it feels like to have lots of energy and to be loads of vitality. And I have it like in the gym where I work, and people are like, Leo, how do you have so much energy? Because my baselines are strong. That's what I want to say. I'm just like, oh, it's all good. It's not me putting on a front. It's not me putting a face out there. It's just that I'm enthusiastic for life. I love it.
There are different types of energy. A lot of us will know people who have what I personally now describe as a manic energy. So their ability to go into the corporate job and be on the office floor and go. And it's constant. It looks like energy. In my experience, I've actually worked with a lot of those people in the medical realm that I worked in, and would look at it in through a similar lens that you would. It's not the type of energy that I particularly desire. Now that I've felt, like you use the word vitality, that I love that word, because that's a word I would use generally more than energy. I want to feel a sense of vitality. And for me, there's other words I connect with vitality. Connection is one of them. Do I feel a connection with other people? Do I feel a connection with myself? I'm not great at that interoception, but when I feel it, I know that I haven't been feeling it, if that makes sense. So when I get those moments where I'm like, oh, I feel really, I mentioned I had a moment the other day that I feel really connected. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ, that means most of the time I'm walking around completely disconnected. And then I can kind of link that sense of disconnection with all the like coffee and TV and social media and phones. Like, oh, wow, I'm doing all those things so I don't have to feel connected. And then you have deeper questions. We won't go into them now, but why do I feel disconnected? What am I trying to avoid?
Yeah.
Vitality, an ability to feel all the positive things. The sun was shining this morning and I was like, wow, I really feel that topping me up here now. But when I don't have that sense of vitality, the sun could be shining and I don't really care.
Yeah.
Ah, it's a nice day. Yeah, whatever. It's grand. It's fine. Yeah. And I'm a person who would often say, not bad. So it's interesting that even using that language, because I wouldn't associate myself with the person you just described, but now that I'm describing it, I'm exactly that person some of the time, not all the time. So yeah, vitality for me is really, really interesting. In my experience, when you ask somebody to like rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, everybody's a 7 for some reason. But when you dig a little bit deeper, they're actually a 2 or a 3. And when a person, myself included, feels going from a 3 to a 4, that's revolutionary. So like energy is one thing, because a lot of people look like they're going and they're doing things and they're really busy, and they're like, but for me that's a manic energy. It's a bit of chaos. It's not sustainable, and it's artificially inflated with stimulants and input and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually that caves and cracks. So that's why I'm really interested in the philosophy here. Like the breath work and the nasal breathing and stuff is a tool that we can use, but when you're working with people, it seems that it's almost always a deeper level of something. This vitality, this energy, this connection that you're accessing first as the foundation. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I'm just looking to build people's strong foundations. That's all, across the board. Breathing for me is the most fundamental building block of that, because without it, you're dead. So if people's breathing is adapted, then it's really important that they get that right. So I look at training that as a number one tool. And then people who I take on a one-to-one basis, we're looking at strength factors, we're looking at flexibility, we're looking at cardiovascular fitness, we're looking at those elements next. Then you also got to factor in, your love and passion for life and your meaning for life and your nourishment. So nutrition is a part of nourishing the body. Like that's a higher up the chain element that I go to. And it starts for me with breathing and movement and getting that right.
Okay.
And when you build those foundations, there's nothing worse than pain in the body. So I give you a story that I read in a book, Inner Engineering by Sadhguru. And he tells a story of back in ancient India, of this king of a realm, and he had 3 servants. And the king says to the servants one day, he goes, oh, what brings you the most joy in life? And the first servant goes, "Oh, you, oh most gracious king, I love you, and you just bring me so much joy. You're amazing." And he goes, "Oh, very good, very good, very good." And to the servant number 2, he asks the same question and gives the same answer. And to the third student, to the third one, he says, "And what do you think? What brings you the most joy?" And he goes, "Oh, taking the shit." And the king goes, "What? How dare you speak such blasphemy in my face? I'm going to give you 1 week in order to prove yourself right. Otherwise, I'm going to chop your head off." And the servant goes, "Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry, Your Highness, and I didn't mean to offend you at all. So, can I make it up for you in some way? Maybe can we have a celebratory party in your honor?" And the king goes, "Oh, okay, fair enough. Let's do that." So they go off anyway, and they go and have the party, and they set that up. And they go out to the woods. And in the first ring of the circle, as you would think, is, that's where the celebration is. And then in the next ring, well, that's where the king resides and his ladies in waiting. And then outside that circle then are the think of like the knights and the ladies of the court. And then outside that is the servants, right? So this is how it's all set up. So everybody goes to bed in the middle of the night. And the third servant gets up and he starts dismantling all the bathrooms. And he starts hiding them and throwing them away. And so the king wakes up in the morning and he's like, "Okay, I need to go to the bathroom." And he's like, he goes out to go to the bathroom and there's no bathroom. And of course, he's not going to go out in the woods where the servants are. No chance of that. So he's like, "Find me the bathroom." So he gets everybody up and everybody's looking and looking. This is going on 1, 2, 3, 4 hours and it's going on. And he's bursting at this stage. Like he's like literally about to go in his pants. And the third servant goes, "Oh, I think I found it. Okay, here it is over here." And they start constructing the toilet. And your man, the king, is like, come on. So they get the toilet constructed and he goes in and he closes the curtain and he's sitting in the toilet and he's like, oh my God, it feels so good. And the third servant says, "Well, Your Honor, what is the best feeling in the world?" The king is like, "Oh, you're right. You're right." And the moral of the story is that a pain in the body takes over absolutely everything else that you want to be or want to do and that you think is joy in your life. If you have pain in the body, and the louder the pain that is, then the worse off the rest of your life is. So for me, it's about building up those very, very foundations. And some of them seem simple, like breathing. But when you do it, it's just, it's amazing to see the difference in people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a colourful tale to tell. Like people listening will be familiar with, like, back pain was one I used to see all the time. If you have chronic back pain, you don't want anything except to not have chronic back pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't care about the score of the game. You don't care about necessarily the career path. You care about what's here right in front of your face right now, which is your chronic back pain. And if I look at everything on a spectrum, which I tend to do nowadays, it doesn't have to be excruciating chronic back pain. It could be low-level anxiety. That's pain. It could be emotional pain. It could be a physical pain. But that chronic, constant pain, it's like a blindfold. It is a distraction from everything that you could. Like, should is a weird word for me, but I say could be focusing on, like the vitality, like the sun shining, like your kids playing, like what you actually want to do with your life. And it's interesting you've said that, like using the breath, because you always hear people when they're talking about breath work or they're doing a guided breathwork session or there's a meditation, focus on the breath, anchor yourself to the breath, and that's kind of like a portal to, oh God, I don't feel good. I remember doing a breathwork session once before. I was just trying loads of different things. There's a good friend of mine, breathwork practitioner. It was an online group Zoom session. Put the headphones on, lay down on the floor in the living room. I remember it was a lovely evening outside, and about 25 minutes in, I was crying. And I don't remember what I was crying about. I wasn't sad or upset. It was an expression of something. I was just lying there crying, doing the breath work, really enjoying the breath work, and crying at the same time. It was such a weird feeling, but it was like, for me, a connection to something deeper that needed to be accessed, and I felt amazing afterwards. And it was like, it's relatively gentle breath work as well. It wasn't extreme, wasn't Wim Hof or anything like that. But I just remember that, wow, I've tapped into something here that I don't really know how to tap into. And I needed this to be able to access it whatever way. But yeah, that was pretty profound for me.
You asked about the benefits of nasal breathing. How about I give you this? How is breathing connected to everything else?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So when you nasal breathe, you automatically use more of your diaphragm, which is your main breathing muscle at the base of your ribs. So in other words, you automatically breathe deeply. So you hear people saying, take a deep breath. Like I used to play around with the doctor and I'd be like, this is after I'd done all my breath training. And I went back to the GP and he goes, I want to listen to your lungs. I says, that's fine. He says, it puts a stethoscope on and he goes, now take a deep breath. And I'm like, and I breathe through my nose really calm and lightly. And he's like, go on, take a deep breath. I'm like, I am. And he's like, Leo, will you take a deep breath? And I says, oh, like this. I said, oh, that's a big breath or a full breath. I says, no, that's something different. And he was like, I know. He's like, I know what I'm going to do with you. But again, language is important. But your nose breathing is connected to deep breathing, which means you get better oxygenation of your tissues, you get better blood flow in around the lungs, so you get a more efficient flow of oxygen around the body when you do that. You highlighted you secrete nasal nitric oxide, you're right there, which helps to dilate or open up your airways and open up your blood system as well. So you have the diaphragm. Now remember, the diaphragm what sits under it is the liver and all of your gut system. So if you have any gut issues and you're not diaphragmatic breathing, you're not breathing through your nose, well then that gut doesn't get massaged, it doesn't get moved, and it doesn't get as good blood flow and as good oxygen to it, which can lead to a lot of pain. For example, they say about 30% of GERD or reflux is attributed to a retracted diaphragm.
Okay,
yeah.
Never knew that.
On the other side of it, then, your heart sits not on top of your diaphragm, it sits into your diaphragm. If you look at real anatomy pictures and dissections, you'll see that there's an impression of the heart into the diaphragm. It sits in it. There's no separation. So as your heart beats, as your breath beats, your heart rate beats. If you breathe fast, it beats faster. If you breathe slow, it beats slower. Blood pressure will drop, or it will increase depending on how you breathe. It's directly related to a couple of processes in your brain. Focus and attention. We do know that through science. Relaxation, we know that too. And fear. Breathing is directly related to fear in the brain. So no matter what trauma or what life path you have been through, if you are sensitive to any type of fear, well then when you bring in breath training and you build resilience through your breathing with the right breathing techniques, you are bringing resilience to the brain to be calm in the face of fear, no matter what one it is, which means it's now becomes a training tool to help to calm your brain to fear, to panic, to anxiety, that whole spectrum in the mind.
Okay. And this is another chicken egg thing as well. Like,
exactly.
If you breathe fast, you can actually elicit a sense of panic.
Mm-hmm.
If you panic, you're going to breathe fast.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I know you can, like, obviously you can use thought processes to still the mind. You can use meditation to still the mind, but that takes a long, long time. You can just initiate breathing practices when you know what ones to do straight away, and it will calm the mind within 2 minutes. For example, you breathe in through the nose and out of the nose. You breathe in for 4, out for 6. That is probably the most researched breathing technique in all of science. And what it shows is that it aligns breathing rhythm with heart rate, with your brainwave rhythms as well. It aligns all three of them, creates a coherent pattern, which will automatically calm the brain and the body. It's beautiful.
Very interesting.
2 minutes, 10 reps. That's all it is. In for 4, out for 6. Simple as that.
Okay.
Just gorgeous.
Yeah.
The other thing it's connected to is your physical body. You talked about back pain. Well, the crura, or the tendons of the diaphragm, attach onto L1, 2, and 3 of the lumbar spine. And out of the same spinal processes comes the hip flexors. So you got really close links into the hip flexors, into hamstring health, and into low back pain as well.
That's really interesting. That's definitely one thing I saw in my physio years was the ability of the body to hold pain that's not necessarily linked with a physical injury.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that around the back, the hip, the groin, the stomach, all that kind of stuff. And when, like, it was bizarre for me because I saw this in real life and practice. I wasn't teaching people this, but this was techniques people would bring to me and we try and stuff like that. the ability of a person to reduce their pain significantly through breathing. Through, like, they called it relaxation at the time, but like not holding that pain, using the breath, focusing on something else, not focusing on the pain. Because a lot of time when you have chronic pain, you almost identify with that pain. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes, and it's a strange way to think about it. It's a crutch almost. It's something you lean into. It becomes part of your identity. So being able to have something else as a locus for your focus.
Nice. and let's break apart how that relaxation could work hypothetically, right? Knowing what it's connected to. So you have an injury, you're in pain. What would be a response to getting injured? So
flinch.
Just listen to my breath.
Oh, sharp.
And now imagine that is embedded in because you're still in pain. So it becomes more chest breathing. Okay, more so, right? So you're in pain, you flinch. Now, all that pain might have even subsided, but let's say it's still there. Okay, how do we get the body and brain to calm down? Well, if you're chest breathing, or even not, if you encourage nasal breathing and diaphragmatic breathing, automatically you're calming your heart rate straight away. Automatically you're calming your gut and enteric system and your immune system straight away. Okay? Just by breathing slower and calmer. Already you can focus on the breath because it's tied to focus and attention. So it takes your attention away from the pain. So you're not bringing more thought to the pain, and you're keeping it on your breath, watching it go in for 4, out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just keeping your attention there, which means it's not anywhere else. And then finally, you're slowing the breathing down. So you're talking to the brain and calming those panic and fear systems and alarm bells going off in your brain. And you're taking them down too. So there's physical, there's neuro-anatomical connections, there's emotional connections. It's,
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's what I observed in real life. Like, it is really incredible with that kind of chronic. And as we pointed earlier on, it doesn't necessarily have to be intense chronic back pain. It could be all the other types of pain and stress and emotion and weight that we feel. Same technique. Same technique.
Same technique, yeah.
That's incredible. Talk to me about science, because we had a conversation earlier on. Everything you've described there always sounds fantastic. I'm a big proponent. I've tried it. I've used it with other people. I know it works for me. I do know it works for me. And for me, oftentimes that's enough. But for a lot of us, it's not enough because we want the science. Where's the hard data on this? I'm rocking these mics like mad here. Where is the hard data?
You want that?
Yeah, give me that data. Give me those numbers. Give me something I can put up on Instagram and debunk everybody else with. And like we pointed out earlier on, I'm not anti-science by any stretch of the imagination. But I also understand there's other elements to what goes on. There's another way of looking at this. So maybe talk to me a little bit about that.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that with the current model that we have, we will never have the science that people want for breathing. Maybe people promote enough of certain things. And the reason is that the whole point of science is a scientific method, which means we review what is currently knowledge out there. We have a question about it that we want to explore. We then explore that question through an experiment. And then we review the results in light of the current body of knowledge. That is the scientific method. Like back in 2001, I know it was costing about $1.5 million to run a effective, like a quality research paper that would get peer reviewed. So it takes a lot of money, right? And that was back in 2001, right? So you'd have to have massive finances behind that in order to do that. 2, you'd have to account for all variables of breathing if you're really going to see if it's effective. What I do, as I says, is I look at, well, I actually didn't say this, but I look at 2 parts to breathing. One is breath training and the other is breath work. Breath training is about building your foundations and restoring your natural centered breath. That's what it's about. Okay. Whereas breath work is a specialized technique. It might be a short one like 4-6, or a longer one like Wim Hof, or a really long one like holotropic breathing. So breath work is more like an experience and a part of the paradigm, and breath training is about building our foundations. There just isn't the quality of research out there. Like the Wim Hof method talk about, we're very science-based. They have 1 quality paper out there. 1. That's it. The Buteyko method back in the day had 3 clinical trials, that were really effective with asthmatics and shown to be effective. And it was actually at one stage given an A rating, an independent A rating as an effective solution for asthma. Then it got put in with all other breathing techniques and it lost that rating. It went down to a B rating or a C rating. I can't remember which. So there just isn't the data. It's just not there. And I'll happily say that after reviewing thousands of papers. What is there is, well, we know the mechanical connections. We know the individual ones, like I said, to fear, to the heart and to the gut. We know these connections. So we're making qualified guesses about them, but they're guesses. So the only way you will know if it works for you is if you try it on you. That's the only way you'll know. And anything to do that is to get you to the table to make you try it. So all the data that's there is, an attempt, in my opinion, to get you to the table to make you try that and open your eyes about something. And that will go across, by the way, for every other health protocol or domain that you want to go down as well. But remember, everything affects the breath and the breath affects everything. Everything impacts it. Like I told you, it's how you were born. It's how you're breastfed or not. It's the type of food you ate as a kid. It's the type of food you're eating now. It's your emotional connections to your family. It's any traumas you've been through. It's the levels of stress that you're able to cope with. It's the physical demands. It's the environment you live in. It's the country you live in. It's the weather you live in. It's the city you live in or the country you live in. It's any allergens and genetic conditions that you have that affect it. Everything impacts the breath. So to account for all those variables in a research paper just isn't possible. You are the research paper.
I really like that approach. I think that's a nice way of packaging a lot of the conversations I would tend to have had over the years. And when I worked in the medical industry, it was the same thing. Yes, there's a time and a place for the science. And the scientific method is something we should all practice in our life. We should constantly be reviewing things and checking in with ourselves and other people. And that is the scientific method, and then trying to replicate it and all that kind of stuff. But as you've really nicely pointed out there, there's never going to be the Leo Daniel scientific paper to prove that every single one of these things works specifically for you in every environment you could possibly think of. That's your job.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to be your own reference point for that. And the metric I think that we should and can use is that sense of vitality and how do I feel, and if required, getting someone to help me recognize the spectrum, recognize what is good and what's not good. So if you don't know if you feel good or not, like you pointed out, a lot of us Irish people, we don't actually know. If you get a feeling that maybe I don't know, if you get that little inkling, you can find out.
Be curious.
You can be curious.
You can
try these things and you can test these things. In my experience, and I've fallen victim to this as well, usually most of these things involve a level of effort. And if there's not an immediate gratification there for me, and if it's not sold to me really hard as an immediate gratification, nowadays I'm not as interested as I probably should be for my own good. So if I'm not told this pill will make you X, this supplement will make you X, and like that's the world we live in now. This particular thing will make you feel this way. You will feel good. You will be respected. You will run faster. You will jump higher if you do this program or do this thing. If it's not sold like that, it's very hard to see the benefit. But
it is, especially because so many is sold like that as well. And you got to go, okay, well, what happens if you don't get that benefit from it?
Yeah.
But what happens if the potential was there for that benefit, but you stopped it because you didn't get it in the timeline that they gave you?
And the funny thing is, most of what we talk about, like the breath, for example, is low-hanging fruit. It's free. It's accessible. You can literally do this right now. You don't have to order it on Amazon and get it next day delivery. You can do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can start to practice this.
And that also, by the way, is why I went down the route of going learning from Wim. Like I learned the Buteyko and the Oxygen Advantage side of things, and like that changed my life utterly. And that was the calm breathing, the slow breathing, and some breath holding techniques involved in that. And Wim was the complete opposite of it. But I'd been in the strength and conditioning personal training industry long enough. Like I remember back in the day, my friend, Derry Temple, I was working for him at the time. And he had a Pilates class. And he was like, Leo, I want you to go train in Pilates. I want you to take over the class. And I was like, no. He's like, I want you to do it. I was like, no. I was like, I'm not doing it. And he was like, why? He says, because they don't breathe well. And because my thought was just the Buteyko paradigm and dogma, which was it's all nasal breathing. Whereas I knew that Pilates used a lot of mouth breathing in it. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And then he was like, Leo, I pay it. One day he was like, I paid it for you, so you're going doing it. So I went to it, and it was an eye-opening moment, because I realized actually Pilates' first principle is breathing. And he's using breathing to create tension in the body, or in other words, to make sure that the spine is secured when lifting load. So it makes complete sense why he would use mouth breathing like that. And I was like, oh, wow. So by the time years later that I heard about the Wim Hof method, I was like, this is weird. I don't know what's going on here. I was like, I got to find out. I got to be curious. And then I was talking to people in it, and there's people who were like, I cured my asthma using the Wim Hof method. I was like, how is that possible? I did it using the Buteyko method. They're like, and people were asking the whole time, like, these are opposites. What's going on? And nobody knew. And that's why I kept on diving deeper and deeper and deeper into different aspects of knowledge that was already out there. And I realized, hold on a second. They all have a role to play. It depends on who you are and how you present. And me now as a practitioner, I can look at and assess what would be an ideal pathway for you. But what they really play on is your nervous system and your brain. And your brain, as a lot of your listeners will probably know, like there's states of fight or flight, which is arousal, and states of relaxation. So if you think of it as a continuum across it, you're never one end of a state or another. You're never fully on and fully off. That's not how the system works. There's always a play between the two, like a puppeteer between the two. But if you live a certain way, you've gone through trauma, you get almost stuck in one side of that continuum. So you're more switched on, you're more aroused, you're more, as you said, that energy that's kind of like manic energy, or you might be more of a depressed energy. Yeah. So you get stuck in those states. So and no matter what practice you look at, a lot of practices can be parasympathetic dominant, in other words, they can be relaxing dominant, and others are very excitatory dominant or arousal dominant. And you got to go, what practice will work best for me to match my state and then move me back towards center? And then when I'm in a natural center, I can build the resilience of that center, which means I can explore either state deeper and deeper and deeper. In other words, I can sit there and meditate for 3 hours if I want, or sit there, watch my kids recital for 3 hours if I need to, or on the other side, and enjoy it. Or on the other side, you can be go, 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 and put the foot in the gas and go all day long. But you can only do that from that naturally centered state. If you're acting from an adapted state or a changed state, then eventually your body is going to break down, is my experience. Whether that is the body, it's physically, or the mind or the spirit, one of them will break down.
Really like that. I had a conversation recently with Adam Starr. He's a meditation practitioner. A very interesting conversation. And this came to light as well. And it was actually something that reminded me of my philosophy in healthcare in general when I worked there too. We're not trying to become experts in meditation or experts in breathwork or experts in a specific tool or become really dogmatic about something specifically. You don't have to put on the flowy pants and grow your hair out and go live in the woods to feel good and connected and healthy. These are tools and applications that we can use in the world that we decide we want to live in. If that's the corporate world or the entrepreneur world or the fitness, whatever. It doesn't matter what the world is. But this idea of coming back to center with the breath, with the meditation, the spiritual practice, with the physical health. I don't want to be like on flexed all the time, but I do want to be well developed. So when I need it, I can use it. When I don't need it, I can switch it off and come back. So all these conversations seem to center around the same idea of understanding where that center is for you and being able to come back to it. And then maybe it's a Wim Hof day. Maybe you need that energy and you want to, maybe you're too high and you need to bring it back down, but understanding that you can flow between these states and you're in control of that rather than being reactive.
Yes.
And when you're reactive, it's the shallow breathing and it's the tensed muscles and it's the stress and and you're just then distracting yourself with all these other stimulants and inputs to try and figure, like, why have I no energy? And you're just adding to the chaos.
Yeah.
So I really love that breakdown you've given us there of bringing it back to center, bringing your levels back to what's kind of not neutral, but I suppose centered and
Yeah.
feels calm and right for you.
Yeah.
And then depending on what the requirement is, whether it's the recital or the All-Ireland final, whatever it is, now I can apply this tool from a place of calm neutrality. I can now enter this realm and apply the energy I need. So it's a high energy, or it's a low energy, or it's a connection, or it's a loving energy, whatever that is.
Yeah.
This sounds a bit airy-fairy, but I've had so many conversations. And this is the common thread that comes through. We want to be able to, and this idea of resilience, I'm less, like we were talking about Ross earlier on, it's less to me now about being an absolute animal all the time. I'm more about developing a wide range of skills in both the physical and the emotional and the spiritual and the connection realm that allow me to be a resilient person in all those realms, as opposed to being like physically in great condition but not able to handle criticism or not able to connect properly with my children.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that idea of resilience, it's this what we're talking about. It's that centered, calm state. Does that resonate with you? Because it seems to be from my from knowing you, having conversation with you and seeing from your content, you've combined a lot of these different realms, the physical and the emotional and the breath work and all that kind of stuff. And you speak about resilience a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a similar?
Yeah. And I just feel that, you know, a lot of people can't do it in the moment, and that's where the training comes in. And that's where you take time out to purposefully build each area individually and what it is. And there's specific things I look for in breathing itself. But in terms of that resilience piece, it reminds me of a Zen story I read where a master and his teacher were walking along a mountainside, or a master and a student, and the student slips and he's fallen down the mountain. He reaches out and grabs onto a bamboo tree, and the bamboo bends over fully and absorbs all his weight and takes all his weight. And the student is there and he clambers back up the bamboo and comes up by the teacher. And the two of them just continue walking on, and the teacher says nothing. And the student eventually breaks the silence and he goes, like, why didn't you help me out there? And he was like, the teacher just goes, be like bamboo. And he was like, what? He goes, be like bamboo. He says, the bamboo bends fully over and absorbs all of the stress. And then as soon as you're finished and you continue walking on, it goes straight back to standing tall and growing towards the sun. And that growing towards the sun, for me, and the meaning of that is the sun is your meaning in life, what brings you joy in life, whether that's high performance, whether it's been a family person, it doesn't matter what it is. That's your pathway. And your resilience is your ability to be able to deal with life, to be able to bend fully to it and go with it, but not break. And then once it's over, to be able to restore it back to center and carry on with your life as you're trying to do.
I have developed a slightly different framing on resilience lately, because up until quite recently, we discussed this earlier on actually, I would view a lot of us as human beings now as soft.
Mm-hmm.
And soft is the word I would usually use. And that did come from a derogatory place before. It did come from a derogatory place. But now that I look at it with a different lens, I'm like, yes, maybe our bodies are softer than they were. Maybe we're a little bit less physically and emotionally resilient compared to previous generations, definitely. Now previous generations have their own problems too. But I see a deep resilience in most people, because they're no longer resilient in the sense that they're coming back towards the purpose in the sun. But you have people who can do what they hate for their entire lives and not break.
So that's hanging onto that bamboo and just hanging there at the edge for dear life.
And if you look at it from one element, that's pretty impressive to be able to absorb that. Like, we are so resilient to be able to do that. And then you look at people in war-torn countries who can survive that. People in relationships that are not happy, and people with children who are sick. That is an insane amount of resilience. However, it's not a quality of life. And I constantly I'm playing with this idea that I am extremely privileged, that if I'm able to figure out where the sun is for me and I can stand tall most of the time and I can bend and come back, I'm lucky enough that my life will facilitate me leading a really, really centered, calm, loving, connected life for the rest of my life. But I'm not in a war-torn country. So it's a hard conversation sometimes to have. But most of the people I speak about are struggling with emotional resilience. They're struggling with the lack of purpose. And that's becoming pain. It's becoming a withdrawal into oneself. It's becoming health issues. It's becoming obesity. It's becoming addiction. It's becoming all these different things. We're not dealing with war in this country, but we're dealing with a different type of struggle. And most people are very resilient to that. Maybe there's some crutches and distractions and alcohol and all that stuff starts to leak in. But an ability to do that is incredible. So the message I'm trying to deliver here is it's in all of us. I do believe it's in all of us to be able to do this. But to your point, we have to train those parts of ourselves that would allow us to bend back out, to identify the sun, to come back to center. That's the real skill. It's to be able to train those, develop the tools, maybe the breath work, maybe the meditation, maybe the physical training, maybe the mobility, maybe the aerobic capacity. All of these things I speak about with yourself, with Sean, with Owen and all these different people, they're only tools to help us redirect that energy, I suppose, recenter that energy. It's not that, because again, sometimes these conversations can sound patronizing to somebody who's not feeling good. They go, well, Leo and Dan have it all. Aren't they great lads? Isn't Leo great now? And he's breathing away there and he's shining in the sun and he's bending like Bambi. Isn't he some great fella there now? I feel like shit and I can't give up the drink and I'm 2 stone overweight and breathing's not going to help me. My message there is you are really resilient because you're getting up every morning, you're doing something, you're doing the thing. So it's there, it's in you. These tools could be the difference. They could be what you need to help bring you back to that centered point and help just reorientate yourself and use the resilience that you have in a different way. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it now, rather than we're all fucking soft.
Yeah.
I mean?
Well, there's a couple of things that maybe I want to parse through there and add commentary to, or maybe my perspective to. The first, which I think we've touched on a lot, is you use the word soft, I use the word weak. I believe that the Western, as where we live, race of people are weaker than we've ever been. So we've created a world, and I'm not talking bicep weak. I'm talking across the spectrum of human being weak, which is physical, mental, spiritual. What I mean by that is our ancestors, great-great-grandfathers, great-granddads and mothers, granddads and mothers, they lived in times where it was hard. They lived through civil wars. They lived through world wars. They lived through famines. They lived through poverty. They lived through hardship, right? And so that environment put them into a position where they had to do a lot of the stuff naturally. For example, they don't have to go to a gym because they bloody toiled on building sites and in fields, right? Or they worked at the home and they were washing. Remember, they were washing clothes by hand. That's bloody tough. Yeah, making food, pulling potatoes, killing cattle by hand. That all happened by hand with very, very little machinery. So there was a lot of physical work built into the natural environment. But they were also highly intelligent in that they managed to create a world where you didn't have to do that hard work, which is the one that we live in now. Stats are we spend 93% of our time indoors. Yeah? 93% of our time indoors. Think cars, houses, offices, indoors, even indoor sports, indoors. We know we exercise less than ever. We know our food is poor quality, and we know our air is poor quality than ever. We know our water is polluted more than ever. So we've, on the one hand, we've created an amazing environment for our mental side, which is incredible, and the tech we have and the buildings, amazing, great. But we've done it at a cost to our human body. And that's why a lot of these, in my opinion, that's why a lot of these diseases and pains are cropping up, is because we've actually been too clever for our own good. And we've created an environment which isn't healthy for our body. And that's why it's so important to put in these practices, to actively put them in as foundations, not as a performance metric like in the Olympic Games. That's not what I'm going for. I'm going for living into my 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s because I have the capability to do that nowadays, but living it, not living through it, not being in a nursing home, but living it to the fullest of my ability. That's what I'm building here for me and for my clients. So that's the first thing, is I think we've created this environment. And remember, our generation is the first generation that's due to live a shorter life than our parents' generation. Let that one sink in. Not because we're not clever enough, but because we've created an environment which is running against our bodies and our brains. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all the benefits that I see people get from putting in like simple acts, like walking out in the fresh air, amazing for you. Such a simple thing to do for the mind and the body. Incredible. If you've nothing else, you've nowhere else to go for a walk. It's incredible. And it will change how you think and how you feel with a good walk outside, no matter what the weather. So these are simple things we can do, right? Really simple things we can do. The other side is, so that's the foundations. The other side you said is living like aiming towards the sunlight. I mean, not nice and calm and almost like Zen-like in modern life. My life certainly isn't like that. I've got a family. It's wild. I've got like modern life is wild anyway, and it should be. And if we look at the Blue Zones research, people look at those Blue Zones and what they saw on Netflix, and they're like, oh, they promoted nutrition and they promoted walking and they promoted, community. Do you know what they didn't promote? What have people who are living over 100 years been through?
That's a great point.
One world war at least, if not two. Like the Japanese, the Italians, the Americans. All those people who are over 100 years have all lived through war. Every single one of them.
That's a great point.
So it's not that, and this is something that isn't highlighted, and I don't know if there's research behind it, but I'm like, living through tough times is part of life. I'm not expecting just everything to be rosy and I go around happy, like with a smile on my face, and it's like a fakeness to it. No. But there's a genuine contentment in knowing who you are and what life path you're on, and that life is gonna suck. You are going to have to grab on to a bamboo to save your life, whether it's mentally or relationship-wise or financially. That stuff happens all the time. But if you have the foundation blocks built and you have that centeredness in you, you will be able to hold on and hold on and hold on and hold on. And when you eventually do clamber back up, you're not going to be broken in two. You're not going to be broken physically. You're not going to be broken mentally or spiritually. You're going to know more of who you are, and you're going to live that experience and then be able to share that experience with people so that they can do the same too. That's all it is with me. Like spending a total of 6 months in bed sick, sucked. Not being able to train, sucked. I hated it. Not knowing what pathway I was going in life, sucked. A lot of people have it a lot worse, but that's not my choice. All I can do is the life that I've been given and that the choice I've made along the way, I've got to take ownership of that and go, okay, this is me and this is how I do it. And take ownership and responsibility and then move as best as you can given what you got.
Yeah. I think we have a programming issue. The reason I say I think we have a programming issue, I think we are by nature very short-sighted, because you mentioned that stat about we are on track to live shorter than the previous generation, live less.
Yeah, so we've reached, I think the average age in Ireland of a male is 82 and a female is 86 years of age, and it's due to decrease with our generation.
And I'm not sure what the metrics they use are. I'm sure that they've been tracking this, but I don't feel that when you say it. It's because I don't think my programming allows me to see further than what's the threat I feel right now. As you said earlier on, I'm not, maybe right now I'm not in a space where I can calmly observe that and go, okay, that's an interesting piece of information. I should really sit and meditate on that and consider that and then change my lifestyle factors because I don't want to live less. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. All I'm hearing is it's a really interesting stat on this podcast that we're doing right now. What am I doing next? And is the business okay? And what my kids are doing. And so I think by nature, and because of the environment we live in now, that short-sightedness is even more extreme. Because when we were 200 years ago, the short-sightedness was, right, am I going to eat?
Survive, yeah.
Well, am I surviving? So there's a programming in us that benefited us and maybe isn't really benefiting us now in this world where we do have the luxury of comfort and food and all this kind of stuff. We're still extremely short-sighted. I want the next thing. I want the promotion. I want the money. I want the job. And the society we've built leverages that. Let's be fair. I'm not anti-capitalist by any stretch of the imagination. I enjoy the nice things in life. I enjoy being rewarded for the work I do. But I do acknowledge there's disadvantages to that based on my programming. I'm a shiny object syndrome. I want the next big thing. I want the next flash thing. You can get distracted. So we think that programming issue for us is a problem because we have all the information that we need. Everybody on the deathbed says the same thing. They don't mention work. They don't mention money. They don't mention yachts. They don't mention Ferraris, connection, family, and purpose. 100% of the time. That's what you hear over and over and over again. And yet for many of us, myself included, it rarely hits home that they're the things we should be focusing on now because we're really, really short-sighted.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked you the question earlier on, I've asked this question so many times in my life. Do we have to personally experience the trigger, the bottom of the barrel, the heart attack, emotionally, physically, spiritually? Do we have to go through the dark night of the soul? Just flick that switch and go, fuck. That midlife crisis, at whatever age in your life that happens, that bit of trauma, that war, do we have to experience that as human beings? And my second part of the question, which I'm exploring now, which is why I'm having this conversation with you, is can I learn something from you, Leo, that gives me a tool to bypass the need to have... Now, I've had struggle in my life, not compared to what some people have had. Some people have it way worse than me. I have a very good life. But I've had my struggles, as we all have. And I have had moments in my life that have triggered me to want to learn about this and to want to improve my life and to focus more on the... But I'm human, so I default back all the time to my short-sightedness.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have to continually have these hard things, or can I put the obstacles in my way? And to take a Ryan holiday, can I actively condition and train myself without the need for... If someone's listening right now who hasn't had a massive trauma in their life, do they have to wait for that to actually be able to feel it? The answer obviously is no from a practical point of view, but on the emotional side, like what is going to motivate you intrinsically to go, right, you know what? Today I will go for that walk. Today I will practice that breathing strategy that Leo shared. Today is the day. It's rare enough that you'll have a moment of clarity without something happening in your life to change
Mm-hmm.
to give you that bit more reach on your vision, I suppose. So I think there's an inherent programming issue here for human beings that our current environment is accelerating. It's worsening the short-sightedness because it's putting more... you can have this right now. You can have this right now. You can have this. Not... Do you know what you should do? You shouldn't take my latest supplement. You should go for a long walk every day. Go to bed early. Eat some good, healthy food and develop your relationships. That doesn't really sell today, but it's probably a better approach. But again, doesn't appeal to our programming. That's just my take on it, so I'm kind of framing it at the moment. That sound familiar?
Yeah. I mean, do we have to have something happen to us? No, it's more convenient if it does, because it forces you into a position that you have very little other choice to make. But even that, sometimes that literally breaks people in two, and it's not good for other people too. So for your listeners that are here now, do you need that? No. What can you do? Be curious, take action. They'd be the two things that would sing out to me. In other words, follow your instincts. So your instincts be curious, which is, okay, I'll listen to Leo and Dan have a conversation. Sounds really interesting. I want to know more about that. Right. Next, take action. Okay, well, what can I do? I want this dimensional walk. Okay, I don't do that. I'm not at that level because I haven't walked in 10 years. Cool, that's it for me. But I can't say to each of your listeners and go, oh, and I'm definitely not going to say, oh, go breathe.
Do a marathon with your mouth taped.
Because it's ridiculous. There's things in the breathing world that are for people and aren't for other people that I wouldn't recommend here at all. So be curious and take action, and do. The more action you take and the more you seek to find, then you'll come upon your treasure. You'll get there.
Do you believe that self-inoculation with voluntary hardship is necessary?
No.
Okay, interesting.
Absolutely not. I think it's another way. What is it Viktor Frankl said? He said, hardship without meaning is masochism.
Yeah.
So in other words, if I'm just going out, let's say, I know that there's a trend out there of go hard.
David, who's going to carry the boat?
Yeah, who's going to carry the boat?
Here we go. He comes up in nearly every podcast now.
And I love his messaging in some regards. I think it's amazing, and it will sing to a certain sect of the population, which is great. But do you need to go and go on adventures? Do you need to row the Atlantic? Do you need to climb Everest? Do you need to cycle the length of Ireland? Do you need to run a marathon? Do you need to do all that stuff? No, absolutely no. In fact, I fight against doing that stuff as much as I can and finding deeper meaning in where I am. And sure, if you're the type of person that loves that stuff, and that it just becomes an obsession for some people and a way of enslaving you to the same thing. Let me give you an example. Okay. I have friends who were ultramarathoners, and they're like, oh, Leo, it's just amazing. Love ultramarathon. And I would talk to them over years. And they go, you hit a point when you're about 70 kilometers in, and it's just like, all of a sudden the pain just goes away and it's just like bliss. And then they're like, and then the pain comes back again, and it's just like you're battling in it and you're going through it. And he goes, one day, one of my friends who was an ex-semi-pro footballer says, I was up in the mountains running a 300-mile race in Europe, and I was about halfway through. And I was up there, and he says, I just had this realization. I was there running, and I just stopped, and I was like, why am I doing this? He's like, I can get the same from breathing. Why am I doing this? And he turned around and hasn't run again. Or rather, didn't run again for about 5 years. And now he goes up the odd time just for the sheer love of it. But he doesn't feel like he has to do it. You look at bodybuilders, the amount of mental health problems there and body dysmorphic problems there, and fitness bikini as well. You look at any sport or any pursuit or any of these guys who are going out on adventures, most of them, when I say have a screw loose, they're dealing with the traumas and the stressors of their life. And there's some of them that find who they are within that, and that's their thing. That's totally cool. Absolutely cool. But is that going to work for me, who has mortgage, who has kids, who has a family, and there's stuff that I love in my life and that I want in my life? I don't want to change that. No, it's going to take me away from all of that. Completely away from all that. And I'll end up burning all those bridges by the time I get back and realize that I need to do it. And that's why I haven't gone. Like, a part of me yearns to go do that stuff, and a part of me goes, well, it's not yet in life for me.
Yeah.
It's not necessary yet. I can learn so much from a conversation with my teenage daughter.
Oh yeah, that's all I had to be. I'm learning from my 6-year-old, yeah.
But do I feel that people need to, sometimes those things are great as well to encourage you to put in the foundations. For example, I want to go run a marathon, or I have another guy doing a Trans-Madeira cycling. I've worked with other people as well, and those adventures are great ways, if you have the mindset for it, to bring in the foundations of health, which will then funnel it into your pursuit. And that's how they become really, really meaningful. For example, I didn't run a marathon just for the sake of a marathon. There was deeper meaning behind that. I wanted to find out about breathing. I wanted to test myself, and I could do that all within the sphere of my current life. I didn't have to leave my job. I didn't have to leave my kids all the time. I didn't have to do any of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think intent is the word really coming to me here. Conscious intent behind why you do what you do. I don't necessarily have a problem with the cognisms. There's a time,
I love it.
There's a time and a place.
Oh, yeah.
And you can call on that every now and again. I talk about this sometimes. But if it's just a method of running away from what you really feel, if it's pain, or if you think you need to do this to be a certain type of person, not a fan. There's a fine line to walk as well between, and I won't use the word cowardice, but fear. So using the mortgage and the kids and the wife as an excuse to not do anything difficult, which is fear-based, and then thinking about it in a really conscious way and saying, well, I actually like these things. And if I was to go and do an Ironman, it's going to take me away this much time. And do I need to do the Ironman? What am I trying to prove here? What's the intent behind the Ironman? Because usually in my experience, I'm trying to prove a point. And I'm trying to prove a point to fill a hole in me, in who I am, because I haven't taken the time to come back to center and really think about who I am, what I want, how I want my life to look. And I find the more I do that, the less I feel the need to prove myself and go run 100 miles or take my mouth and run a marathon or whatever it might be. That I feel less of a need to prove myself. And I'm finding I'm now looking at adventures as like, what do I want to do? That I can also bake in, because I am a big fan of, I use the word self-inoculation, using hard things to show me what I'm capable of. It's more of a self-belief thing. But then I ask a question, why don't I believe in myself? So am I just doing this to prove to myself I can do this? Or am I doing this because I want to physically challenge myself to become a better version of who I am? And it's very subtle. I'm still doing the thing, but why am I doing the thing? And is it a conscious decision, or is it a fear-based decision?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the kind of the separation I put in that. And I think a lot of resistance to, there's definitely a cohort of people who are now, go, let's do it, hard, flog, and they're screaming at you online, and that's become their identity. And then there's a cohort of people who are really unhealthy and unhappy and are so far away from that because it's so threatening to them.
Yeah.
It's so threatening to their way of life. I have to go from this life of ultimate comfort and unhappiness because I'm so comfortable all the time to running 100 miles and being an ultramarathon runner. That's so unachievable for me.
So one of the Michael Easter has a book out called, I don't know, it's gone from my head. Great book out, and he talks about a misogi, which is a Japanese term, which is you put yourself under like you said, hardship. But he has rules around his misogis.
Oh, is a misogi like a big life event that you decide to do to give you a level of enlightenment or something? Is that the...
That's the idea of it, but it doesn't have to be a big life event. So what he recommends is you do one every quarter of the year.
Oh, okay.
Right? But you're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to share it on social media.
Sure, why? If it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen.
And you have to have a 50% chance of failure.
50% chance of failure. Okay.
Whatever you choose. And you can't die. That's his third rule.
Okay, that's pretty good condition.
Yeah, that's a pretty good condition.
What's an example of a misogi?
For example, it could be, I did one a couple of years ago, without knowing it was it, but it was it. I had a client, and he, this is how we developed it. He couldn't play GAA football anymore. His knees were like ruined. And we've been training, and he was getting bored with the gym. He was like, oh, come here, stop this. But we got him to a level where he could do some running. It was more just the cutting, and it was more the impact, like getting taken out of it was what worried him. So I says, you actually need some adventure. You need something to do. I says, do you want to do something? He's like what? I was like, what no? I says, I'll do it with you. And he's like, okay, what we do? I says, do you want to climb a mountain? He was like, that sounds good. And then I was looking up some stuff. I says, how about we do the 4 Peaks challenge? He says, what's that? I says, highest peak, one in Munster, Leinster, Connacht, and Ulster. He's like, yeah, that sounds good. I says, usually it's done over 7 days. I don't have that time. How about we do it in 24 hours? He's like, yeah, let's go, game ball. So we're like, okay, do you want to put it out to anybody else? We need some other guys. And they're like, yeah, we'll do it. So there ended up in a group of like 5 or 6 of us. And we set out, and our goal was to climb the 4 highest peaks in Ireland in 24 hours. One of the guys didn't make it. Another guy got injured on it. 3 of us, actually there was 4 of us, made it to the end. None of us made it in the time. So we missed out the 24-hour slot. Doesn't matter. Like, I'm not getting a medal for it. I'm not telling all my friends about it at the time. I'm not doing it for records. I was doing it to do it. And the amount of learning I got from doing it was incredible. Now, someone went back and said, oh, we're going to go back next year and beat our time. I was like, no, I got all my learning from that. That's me done.
Yeah.
But that was somebody else's misogi could be, do you know what? I'm going to go to the gym this month.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 3 times a week. And that's it. That's it. And I have a 50% chance of failure. Yeah, absolutely you do. That's my misogi. It might be, I'm going to sit down and do 4-6 breathing for 3 times a day, every day. So it can be very personal is what I mean. But it's a challenge. And depending what level you're at, like you've done a ton of personal development work, a ton of physical work, you're in great shape as well, Dan. So I can see why things of a more adventurous nature catch your eye. But it doesn't have to be like running the length of Africa. It's cool if it is.
Yeah.
And if that's how you want to build your life around, but it doesn't have to be. You can take inspiration and apply it to yourself.
Okay. Yeah. No, I like that. It's a little bit more accessible. It's a little bit less threatening, but can give you probably more results than gotta go flog myself, tell everyone I run 100 miles, scream at myself, inevitably probably fail, or even if I succeed, not really get much fulfillment from it because there was no real purpose behind it. What was the Frankl quote? I like that.
That was
hardship without meaning is masochism.
Masochism. Yeah.
Hardship without meaning is yeah.
That's Viktor Frankl. That was the meaning of life. He was the psychiatrist that was in the concentration camps.
Yes. Yeah. What's his other book?
No, that's a man's search for meaning.
Oh, sorry, man's search for meaning. That's what it is. Man's search for meaning. Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to keep it too much longer.
Yeah.
But I will be flogged if I don't talk about nasal breathing for performance and give some practical takeaways for people. How do I increase my performance by 50% by breathing through my nose? Tell me right now. No, but
okay. So when it comes to breathing, nasal breathing is your base. People are talking a lot about zone 2 training now, and Sean will talk about zone 2 training.
Check out the podcast we just did.
Yeah. Which is fabulous if you've never done it. But it also means you getting tech and doing tested and all the rest. Hey, train yourself to nasal breathe. You are most likely zone 2, maybe a bit of zone 3 while doing it. That's it. So you have that innate ability within you to train yourself. You don't need tech. You don't need extras. They're great. They're lovely to have.
You now, man.
Listen, I know.
Leo says I don't need my test, Sean.
No, like if you're data oriented, go for it. But
everything's a tool that can enhance the.
Absolutely, and the data is magnificent. But once you learn how to use the tool, you can get rid of it. So. First of all, when it comes to breath training, which I told you was a whole world of restoring your naturally centered breath, there's 3 parts. There's the mechanics. In other words, can I use the muscles efficiently? Sometimes people's diaphragm is retracted or stiff. Sometimes it's their chest. Sometimes it's their exhale and their mouth and their jaw is all stiff. So there's a couple of different techniques to restore that function. The second then is more like the Buteyko and oxygen advantage side, which is about restoring the physiology balance, which is about nasal breathing. It's about calm breathing. It's about a tolerance to breath holding. That's what it's about. And the last bit is the rhythms, which is more about the interaction with the brain and the likes of Wim Hof, holotropic, that style of breathing. Now, they all play on each other, but I've found people who do the oxygen advantage, sometimes they're still stiff and they never succeed fully with it. Because they're just stiff and they actually need some mechanical work done. I find people who do the Wim Hof and sometimes don't do the oxygen advantage need to add that. So there's a mix depending on where you are. But if you train all 3 phases of training and hit your goals in all 3 phases, you will restore your naturally centered breathing. That will mean you'll be able to breathe through your nose all through the day, all through the night, low and moderate level exercise. Okay? You do that, your recovery will improve by at least 40%.
Wow.
At least. Yeah.
And what kind of metrics
I've had probably about 85 people through testing for that. And what I mean by that is what I did was I tested them day 1, heart rate recovery for a minute. I did a John will kill me. I did a field version of a VO2 max test. So look, Sean's is a gold standard. You have the means, go get tested. It's amazing. I did a field version of it because it was through COVID at the time. I said, okay, you're going to run depending like GA, do a 1.5K aerobic run, will be a common one. 12-minute run is a standard, like a Cooper test. So I said, do a 12-minute run and time your distance or get your distance and then get your heart rate recovery after a minute. That's it. That's all what we need to do.
And just clarify for people what you mean by heart rate recovery.
So in other words, let's say at the end of 12 minutes, your heart rate is like 176 beats. After a minute, what's it down to? Have you got it down to 150, 140, 130? What's it at? Yeah. So they got those standards. Then they did breath training for 10 days. And then they retested at the end of 10 days. And they improved their heart rate recovery by over 40%. And their overall performance in terms of endurance improved by 2%, which isn't much.
Did the training allow them to nasal breathe during the run?
Mm-hmm.
And that was where the recovery came from?
What I did then was, see, I took this from Days of Thunder, the old school movie. Oh, yeah. You remember?
Yeah, I do.
I actually took inspiration from that where I let them run the test the way they wanted to the first day. I says, just run 12 minutes, run as hard as you can, and time your recovery and give me your distance. Then I trained them during the week and gave them some education. I said, okay, when you're running your second test, I want you to run it my way. Nasal breathing for as long as you can, in and out of the nose. Then I want you to progress to in through the nose, out of the mouth, and then eventually all mouth breathing. And tell me what you get.
All mouth breathing or all nose breathing?
All mouth breathing at the end. So think of breathing. You got like 3 gears of breathing is how I think of it. And this is what I discovered through the marathon. Gear 1 is all nasal. It's low level exercise. Yeah. In and out of the nose. Gear 2 is now in through the nose, out of the mouth, right? So you're dumping CO2, which is why you fatigue, okay? And then you're breathing in through the nose. So you're getting good breathing mechanics on the way in, you're getting good air quality, and on the way out, you're getting rid of excess CO2, yeah? That's in and around your threshold level. That's what I found, yeah? So top of zone 3, zone 4, that's where you're at. and then eventually go into all mouth breathing because you're killing it and you're pushing yourself as hard as you can, and your anatomy mightn't allow yourself to nasal breathe. So go mouth breathing at the end and just finish yourself off.
Okay.
And then breathe through your arse.
And then breathe out your hole. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting, and it's nice to hear it like that, because again, it's not a dogmatic nasal breathe all the time. Because I've tried that and it's completely discouraged me. I remember the first time, literally when I heard about nasal breathing first, taking me out a few nights, then I went down and jumped on the treadmill, blasting out these intense kind of Tabata sets and trying to fucking breathe through my nose the whole time. And I was like, oh, I can't do it. But I didn't understand about gears and intensity and
because like nobody else talks about it.
Yeah.
I did it when I was running the marathon, or just before I ran the marathon. I got talking to a S&C coach over in the States. His name is Brian McKenzie and Rob Wilson.
Oh yeah.
He was one of the pioneers of CrossFit.
Yeah.
Then developed power speed endurance. And now he's gone in and created Shift Adapt. And we were talking at the time. He knew all about Wim Hof and yoga breathing. I knew all about Buteyko and Oxygen Advantage. And we just had chats. That's all it was, just conversations. And I was like, here's what I'm finding out. And he was like, here's what I'm finding out. We both came to very similar conclusions at the same time, both tested similarly at the same time. He brought out, and they Rob labeled it the breathing gears, and he has like a 5-gear system. I was like, no, it's levels of breathing, and it's just 3 levels, because that's what my data was showing. So, but essentially that's how you use your breath to level up and to know where you are. Think of the awareness that brings to you. You're in the middle of a match and you're mouth breathing, right? Now you're in the middle of a play, but the play breaks away. It goes down the far end of the pitch. You're mouth breathing. What do? Do you stay in 3rd gear, or do you bring yourself down through the gears? Yeah? Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And that's just one very easy example that works amazingly well.
It's something I started to do like almost subconsciously about 3 or 4 years ago. It was always in the back of my mind, nasal breathing. I've been taping my mouth, and those breaks between play, trying to get back to nasal breathing in the car, where I would usually, like in the morning, you're rushing to getting the kids in, the stress levels are high. I was like, right, let's use the tool here. Nasal breathing. It's completely changed the experience. And shout out to Smiley Owen, who's our S&C coach down the club. We have now built into every single warm-up that we do with the aim to, like, because most of the lads have never ever tried any of this. So at the end of our warm up, once we've hit that kind of intensity and we're just about getting ready to play, everybody comes in, links up, and he'll lead like 3 or 4 just low, slow, deep breaths in through the nose, out through the nose, just to kind of train us that in that heightened state we can return back to center, calm. So we're not like, oh, go, and then there's 10 minutes before the game, and then we might run out of energy and you start the game flat. So it's all about just managing that, bringing it back to center. So
managing your state of arousal.
Yeah. Very interesting. So it's nice to see it starting to infiltrate and starting to get out there, and people are talking about it. And one last piece of advice, which I know people hate doing, but I love asking, because like most people, me included, listen to a podcast and like, right, what can I do right now? Where can I start? And they're not going, I said this to Sean as well, like the chances are they're not going to go and buy the heart rate strap straight away. I book a VO2 test. But what could be that entry level for them? So in terms of the nasal breathing, where should or could people start? Even if it's not best case scenario and they don't go and have some training and go deeper into this, is there something that right now people listening could, okay, I want to start playing around with this? What's the best place for you?
If you can nasal breathe now, do it straight up, and then take it to a level where you can do it through whatever level of exercise you can do. Start building it into your everyday practice. If you can't, you need to train it. You need to do the techniques to build it up, and there's a couple of reasons for that, but you need to do the techniques to build it up.
What does can't look like? Because I can breathe through my nose right now.
Yeah.
But I start to get resistance and I stop.
When do you get resistance? When you're walking, when you're jogging, when you're running? Okay. All of them?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. When do I get resistance?
Yeah.
Even just sitting here now, if I start to breathe through my... Now, I know I have a few techniques I'll go to, and like the breath holds and stuff like that. Sure. And I'll feel the opening of the nasal passage.
So what that tells me is that you haven't built up your foundations strong enough yet. When you're breathing here, sitting here, only one nostril actually works properly.
And me?
Everybody.
Okay.
And there's a cycle. There's a nasal cycle that happens every 90 minutes to 4 hours where your nostrils switch. So that's how little effort you should have in your breathing. But a lot of people have inflammation in their nasal passages, which means they're blocked, which means they feel resistance even sitting here. And that can be, as I says, for a ton of reasons. That tells me you need training.
Yeah,
I'm not. I won't beat around the bush. You need to do the techniques and build up your bolt score, build up your breathing techniques, to get you to a foundation level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It's not what people want to hear.
Yeah.
But it's the way it has to be. I do understand.
It's the way it is.
Yeah.
And the question is then, are you motivated to do that, and do you want to do that? And do you need community support around doing that?
Yeah, probably not because I'm here. So maybe let's work on lengthening out the old vision here a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only way. Genuinely.
Okay.
I haven't found, and if I find another way, I'll tell you, because I'm all for efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the message, really. Like, if there was another easier way, you talk about it.
Well, that's why I went searching. Like, for example, the 3 phases: the mechanics, the physiology, or I call breath resilience, and the rhythms. Those 3 phases exist for me because I was coaching people. It took me 6 months to start restoring my breathing. I was probably one of the longest clients I had of myself. Now I can sometimes restore it within a session, because their problem, even though they felt restricted in their nose, mightn't have been their nose. It might have been because their diaphragm was all stuck and retracted and restricted, and their body just wouldn't allow them to breathe. And as soon as I gave them that space and they did the techniques, boom, all of a sudden it just freed up completely. And then I've seen a bolt score, which is a measurement we use in the oxygen advantage of breathing. Typically they say it should rise an average of 2 seconds every week. I saw a difference of 15 seconds in a session. I was like, what is going on here? It's incredible. So I've cut that timeline down from 6 months down to, the shortest I've seen is about 3 to 4 weeks, but typically you're looking at a 10 to 16 week block for normal people of specific training. And that's why when I'm coaching people and they want to work with me, this is all up front. I don't hide it. You train 2 to 3 times a day, takes 10-minute training sessions, and then you put in the lifestyle stuff around it. That's what you get up front and go, if you're not ready to commit to that, you're wasting your time.
Okay.
Because I care about you getting to your goal. I don't care about you feeling a little bit better.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want you feeling a little bit better. I want you feeling great.
Yeah.
I want you noticing a difference that when you stop doing that, you don't need to do it again. Like, I don't do breathing techniques every day of the week. I probably do them twice a year. Now I'm toying around with free diving, so a little bit more.
Twice a year?
Yeah, why?
So is this your nasal breathing?
My breathing is restored. My lifestyle supports my breathing now. How I train, how I live, how I eat, how I relate to stress, all those things that cause adapted breathing. Well, now I've aligned all those things. So why do I need to train all the time?
Okay. I get it. Yeah. You've just clicked another switch in my brain for me there. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Is there anything glaringly obvious I've missed in this conversation that you'd like to explore?
No, I think we had a good chat.
You think we're good?
Yeah, I think we had a good chat.
I really enjoyed that now. This was a difficult one for me because I was like, I know some stuff about this that's often dangerous, because there's a few things you've shared now today. There's like that bit at the end there, the lifestyle supporting the breathing. So it's no longer a conscious, I have to practice this breathwork 3 times a day for the rest of my life. You're building the framework for yourself to support functional breathing.
Absolutely. It's like somebody injures their knee. Okay, go get your physio, go do your rehab exercises, and then go play your sport. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And if your knee niggles you down the line, you have your exercises to do. You know what to do.
Yeah.
You
don't become a knee patient. For
yeah.
Life.
Yeah. It's the exact same idea.
Okay.
Exact same, yeah.
Yeah. No, Leo, really, really have enjoyed this. As I said, like, sometimes I have to have the same conversation multiple times, but it takes one like this to really like put all the pieces together. So I really, really appreciate that. If and when people want to reach out and have a conversation with you or argue with you, sometimes happens. Where can we find you?
Beautiful. Business is Innate Strength. You get that on Instagram. It's probably the best. Website is Innate-Strength.
This is your 6-week aesthetic transformation. Is it?
Yeah. Become ripped and beautiful like me.
Okay. No, this is for your very, very connected, adapted, holistic approach to health, lifestyle, wellness, breathwork, strength, mobility, your bamboo in the sunshine. That's
my niche.
Okay, I love it.
But no, that's where you'll find me. What I do is I do one-to-one on coaching. I published a book last year, so if anybody wants it, it's there where it goes through. It maps out the connections to life, connections to specific disease, and then the training program.
Could you share the title of the book?
Breathe Free.
Breathe Free.
Breathe Free, yeah. Get it off my website rather than Amazon. Amazon are a disaster for delivering. So yeah, it is like it's a Bible of breathing. It's a monster. It has like QR codes for videos and the whole lot on
Cool,
it, which is
okay.
cool. Like it's my life's work in that one, and that's breathing for health, which is about 90% of the benefits of breathing. When it comes to sports performance, if you layer in the health aspect, you will get almost all of the benefits you need. The extra little tweaks for sports performance are the last 10%.
Okay.
And then what I'd love it to share is if you have, because I'm going now into, I'm reaching out to teams, I'm reaching out to schools and to corporates, and I'm like, okay, I do a 2-hour training session where I show you how to use it for sport and then for health. And then I do full-on training days where we bring in a really cool test, challenge, retest model. And I've seen some pretty cool results of that. So
that's the stuff that really gets people going because they can see it physically. Like, again, we need something to...
Well, I take the same approach to the breathing. Like, I'll test your breathing, then we'll train it or challenge it and train it, and then we'll retest towards the end, and you'll see the difference in it, like in the breathing itself. I give you the program to go away as a team and as an individual. You'll know what you need to do coming away from that. But then the training days are like, that's where I'll bring in my background with, ice baths and saunas and pressure. I call it like pressure testing, so skills testing under pressure and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. They're good fun.
Yeah, you really find out your ability to become a center then. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, man.
Everybody get nasal breathing. Let's go.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dan.